We were snowed in on Christmas Eve. It was just me, my wife Emma, and our 8-year-old son Daniel. The storm had rolled in fast, earlier than expected, blanketing everything in thick, white snow. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows and making the house groan like it was alive. But inside, it was warm. The fire crackled in the fireplace, casting flickering shadows on the walls, and the soft glow of the Christmas tree lights filled the living room with a cozy glow. Daniel was buzzing with excitement, barely able to sit still. He had been counting the days to Christmas for weeks, and now it was finally here. He was determined to stay up and catch Santa Claus in the act. Emma and I exchanged amused glances, indulging him as parents do. It was harmless fun, and we were all stuck indoors with nowhere to go. "Only a few more minutes," Daniel said, his eyes glued to the clock on the wall. It was a little past 11:50 p.m., and he was fidgeting in his spot on the couch. Emma ruffled his hair. "Santa only comes when kids are asleep," she teased. Daniel pouted, but didn't move. "I'll be quiet. He won't even know I'm here." The clock ticked closer to midnight. The storm outside raged on, the wind whipping snow against the windows in sharp, stinging bursts. The lights on the Christmas tree flickered once, then again. "Storm must be messing with the power," I muttered, just as the house plunged into darkness. The sudden loss of light made the room feel colder and more oppressive. The only illumination came from the dim embers of the dying fire. I grabbed the flashlight from the mantel and clicked it on, the beam cutting through the darkness. I went to check the fuse box, guessing it was probably a blown circuit. Emma nodded, pulling Daniel closer to her and asking me to be careful. I made my way to the basement, the wooden stairs creaking under my weight. The fuse box was in the far corner, and as I approached, I heard the faint sound of something or someone scraping against the outside of the house. I paused, listening. It could have been the wind, I told myself. Just the wind. I reset the fuses, but the power didn't come back. Frustrated, I headed back upstairs, already rehearsing the call I'd make to the power company in the morning. That's when I heard Daniel's voice from the living room. "Who are you?" he asked, his tone curious but cautious. My heart stopped. I rushed back into the room, the flashlight shaking in my hand. Emma was still on the couch, but Daniel was standing by the large window that faced the front yard. His breath fogged up the glass as he pressed his face against it, peering into the darkness outside. "Daniel," I said, my voice low and steady. "Step away from the window." He didn't move. I crossed the room quickly and pulled him back. "What did you see?" "There's someone out there," he whispered, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. "I think it's Santa." Emma shot me a worried glance as I shone the flashlight toward the window. At first, I saw nothing but swirling snow and the skeletal outlines of the trees in our front yard. Then, the beam caught something, a figure standing motionless at the edge of the driveway. They were tall, draped in a long, flowing cloak that flapped slightly in the wind. The hood was pulled up, obscuring their face. The snow around them was undisturbed, as if they had simply appeared there. My blood ran cold. "Santa," Daniel whispered again, tugging at my sleeve. "No," I said firmly. "It's not Santa." The figure raised a hand slowly and tapped on the window. 3 soft, deliberate knocks. Emma gasped, pulling Daniel closer. I stepped in front of them, shielding them from the window as best I could. "Stay here," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. I made my way to the front door, every instinct screaming at me to lock it, bolt it, barricade it, anything to keep that thing outside. But as I reached for the lock, the door creaked open on its own. The cold air rushed in, biting and unforgiving. I swung the flashlight toward the doorway, but the figure was gone. Only the storm remained, howling and relentless. I slammed the door shut and locked it, turning back to the living room. "Daniel?" The room was empty. "Emma!" I shouted, panic gripping me. "Daniel's gone!" We tore through the house, checking every room, every closet, every corner. He was nowhere. The only sound was the wind outside and the pounding of my heartbeat. Then we heard it, a soft, familiar laugh coming from upstairs. Daniel's laugh. We bolted up the stairs, bursting into his bedroom. He was there, asleep in his bed, tucked under the covers as if nothing had happened. His face was peaceful, his breathing steady. Emma let out a shaky sigh of relief, but I couldn't move. My eyes were drawn to the window. Frost covered the glass, and in it, a single word had been traced with a finger. Believe. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by Daniel's bed, watching over him until the first light of dawn crept through the window. The next morning, the storm had passed. The world outside was blanketed in pristine white, untouched and perfect. But in the snow leading away from our house, I saw them. Footprints. They weren't Daniel's. They were too large, too deep. They led into the woods and disappeared. Daniel doesn't remember any of it. But every Christmas Eve, when the clock strikes midnight, I feel a chill. You know, I hate driving long distances, right? I mean, I can handle it, but something about being alone on those empty roads at night gets to me. This happened a few years ago, right before Christmas. I was heading to my parents' house. They live about 300 miles away, and the road between us is desolate, to say the least. No streetlights, no towns for miles, just stretches of dark, rural highway. I left after work, around 7 p.m., figuring I'd make it there by midnight if I kept a good pace. The drive started fine. I had my playlist going, a thermos of coffee by my side, and nothing but an open road ahead. It was peaceful in a way, just me and the stars. About halfway through, I noticed my gas gauge was dipping lower than I expected. I wasn't panicking yet, but I knew I had to find a station soon. After another 20 minutes or so, I spotted one, a lone petrol station glowing faintly in the distance like a beacon. It was old, run down. One of those places that looks like it's been there forever, with a single pump and a flickering neon sign that reads, "Open 24 hours." I pulled in, relieved to have found it. There was no one else around, just the dull hum of the pump and the sound of the wind rustling through the nearby trees. I started filling up the tank, and that's when I saw him. A man dressed as Santa Claus. He was standing by the entrance to the little convenience store, leaning against the wall like he belonged there. His suit was dirty, the fur trim matted and stained. His beard was yellowed and uneven, and his eyes were the worst part. They were too wide, too bright, like he hadn't blinked in hours. "Merry Christmas," he called out, waving at me with a gloved hand. I forced a smile and nodded. "Merry Christmas," I muttered back, more out of politeness than anything else. But I didn't linger. Something about him made my skin crawl. I finished pumping the gas, paid at the counter, keeping one eye on the door the whole time, and got back into my car as quickly as I could. As I pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Santa was still standing there watching me. His hand was raised in a slow, deliberate wave. I shook it off, telling myself I was overreacting. It was just some guy trying to get into the holiday spirit, right? But then, not even 5 minutes later, something felt wrong. The car started pulling to the right, and there was this thumping sound coming from the back. I groaned, knowing exactly what it was. A flat tire. I pulled over to the side of the road, cursing under my breath. The stretch of highway I was on was pitch black. No streetlights, no other cars in sight, just me and the empty road. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove compartment and got out to take a look. Sure enough, the rear tire was completely flat. But as I inspected it, my heart sank. It wasn't just flat, it had been slashed. A clean, deep cut right through the rubber. My mind immediately went back to the petrol station. Had someone done this while I was inside paying? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. And there was only one person there. Santa. I tried to stay calm. The important thing was to get the spare on and get out of there. I could worry about the rest later. I popped the trunk, pulled out the spare and the jack, and got to work. The flashlight's beam wobbled as I worked, casting long, jittery shadows on the pavement. The silence around me felt oppressive, like the whole world was holding its breath. Then I heard it. The faint rumble of an engine. A car was approaching from behind. I stood up, heart pounding, as the headlights grew closer. The car slowed, then stopped a few feet in front of mine. The driver's door opened, and out stepped Santa. "Need a hand?" he called out, his voice cheerful, like this was the most normal thing in the world. "No, I'm good," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. He took a step closer, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Come on now, it's Christmas. Let me help." "I said I'm fine," I insisted, gripping the tire iron tightly. Santa didn't move. He just stood there, grinning that too wide grin, his eyes gleaming unnaturally in the darkness. The flashlight flickered, its beam stuttering and throwing shadows across his face. The way the shadows played made his smile look even wider, almost splitting his face in two. His eyes were unblinking, fixed on me like a predator waiting for its moment. I tightened my grip on the tire iron, my heart racing. "Funny thing," he muttered like he was talking to himself. "I don't remember seeing anyone else out here tonight." The words sent a jolt of fear through me. I forced myself to focus on the tire, hands shaking so badly I could barely twist the lug nuts. Each turn felt agonizingly slow, like I was moving underwater. The silence pressed down, broken only by the sound of my pounding heart. And then he started humming. Jingle bells. But not like you've ever heard it. It was off-key, drawn out and wrong, the kind of tune that felt like it was scraping the inside of my skull. The sound made it impossible to focus. I kept working, forcing my hands to keep moving, even though every instinct screamed at me to run. Santa took a step closer. His boots crunched on the gravel. "You sure you don't need a hand?" he asked, his voice almost playful now. "I'm fine," I managed to choke out of my dry throat. He didn't stop. Another step, and then another. I could see the dirty fabric of his suit now, the way the fur trim was stained and matted. His gloved hands flexed at his sides, fingers curling and uncurling. He was close enough that I could smell him, a sour, metallic scent that made my stomach turn. "You should have let me help," he said softly, his voice dropping to a whisper. The last lug nut finally clicked into place. I slammed the trunk shut and spun around, holding the tire iron in front of me like a weapon. "Stay back," I warned, my voice shaking. Santa just tilted his head, smiling. "You're not very festive," he said, almost pouting. "That's no way to treat Santa." Without another word, he lunged. I swung the tire iron wildly, the metal whooshing through the air. I didn't hit him, but it was enough to make him hesitate, just for a second. I took the chance, diving into the car and slamming the door shut. My hands fumbled with the keys, slipping once, twice. Outside, Santa pressed both hands against the window, his face inches from the glass. His breath fogged up the pane, and through the mist, I saw his lips moving. He wasn't humming anymore. He was whispering something, words I couldn't hear, but that made my skin crawl. The key finally turned. The engine roared to life and I floored it. I didn't stop, not for anything. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Every few seconds I glanced in the mirror, expecting to see headlights behind me. But the road stayed empty. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was out there following me. When I finally pulled into the driveway, I parked and just sat there, shaking. The house was warm and inviting, Christmas lights twinkling in the windows, but it felt like a world away. Inside, my parents greeted me with hugs and smiles, but I couldn't fully relax. Even as I sat by the fire, surrounded by family, I kept glancing out the window, half expecting to see that red suit standing at the edge of the yard. Have you ever had something happen to you that just sticks, no matter how much you try to forget it? Something that, even years later, makes your skin crawl just thinking about it. That's what last Christmas was like for us. It started a few days before Christmas. My wife Emma and I decided to take our daughter, Sophie, to the Christmas market downtown. She was only 4 at the time, and she loved anything to do with Christmas, lights, music, Santa Claus, you name it. The market was packed, just wall-to-wall people. But it was beautiful. Twinkling lights everywhere, the smell of roasted chestnuts, carolers singing, one of those scenes that feels like it's straight out of a Christmas card. Sophie was holding Emma's hand, skipping along between us, excited about everything she saw. But then, somehow, in the crowd, we lost her. 1 second, Emma had her hand. The next, she didn't. I'll never forget the look on Emma's face. Pure panic. We both started shouting her name, shoving through the crowd, looking everywhere. I was terrified. 5 minutes felt like 5 hours. My mind went to all the worst places. Then I saw her. She was standing by one of the booths, talking to a man dressed as Santa Claus, but not the kind you want your kid around. His suit was filthy, stained with who knows what. His beard looked fake, yellowed, and scraggly like it had been used for years without a wash. And his eyes, they were sharp, too sharp like he was studying her. And he was touching her. His hand was on her head, stroking her hair like you would a dog. Then he let it slide down, resting on her waist. Something inside me snapped. I ran over, grabbed Sophie, and pulled her away from him. Emma was right behind me, wrapping Sophie in her arms. The man just smiled. Not at me, though. At Sophie. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a candy bar. "A candy for a sweet girl," he said, handing it to her. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just stared at him, trying to burn his face into my memory. Emma pulled Sophie close, and we walked away as fast as we could. We threw the candy away as soon as we were out of sight. No way were we letting her eat something from that guy. I tried to brush it off as some weird encounter, but it stuck with me. I kept seeing his face in my head, the way he touched her, the way he smiled. Emma told me to let it go, that we were overreacting, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Then Christmas Eve came. We were home, just the 3 of us. Sophie was excited, bouncing off the walls waiting for Santa. We had a nice dinner, put out cookies and milk, and got her ready for bed. Everything felt normal. Until we heard the footsteps. They were faint at first, just a soft crunching sound outside, like someone walking in the snow. Emma thought it was a deer, or maybe a neighbor. But then came the tapping. 3 slow, deliberate taps on the living room window. I went to check, but when I looked outside, there was nothing. Just the empty yard, lit up by the glow of our Christmas lights. A few minutes later, we heard it again. Footsteps, closer this time. And the taps, louder. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside, flashlight in hand. The cold hit me hard. but I barely felt it. I scanned the yard, my breath coming in short, sharp puffs. Then, just at the edge of the light, I saw him. A man in a Santa suit, standing perfectly still by the tree line. My heart stopped. I blinked, and he was gone. I ran back inside, locked all the doors, and told Emma what I saw. She tried to stay calm for Sophie's sake, but I could see the fear in her eyes. We double-checked the locks and windows, made sure everything was secure, and went to bed. But I didn't sleep. Christmas morning came, and Sophie woke us up early, like always. She was so excited to open her presents. We went downstairs, and for a moment, everything felt normal again. Until I saw it. A small, neatly wrapped present under the tree. One I didn't recognize. I figured Emma had picked up something last minute, but when I asked her about it, she shook her head. We both stared at it, neither of us wanting to touch it. But Sophie, being a kid, grabbed it and started tearing off the paper. Inside was a candy bar, the same kind the man had given her at the market. But it wasn't the candy that made my blood run cold. It was the card attached to it. In shaky, childlike handwriting, it read, "A candy for a sweet girl." I grabbed the phone and called the police. They came quickly and searched the house, the yard, everything. But there was no sign of forced entry, no footprints in the snow, nothing. They couldn't explain how the present got there. All they could tell us was to keep our doors locked and be vigilant. Not exactly reassuring. It's been a year now. We've moved since then, to a different town, hoping to put it behind us. But every time Christmas comes around, I can't help but think of that man. And I can't help but wonder if he's still out there, waiting for another sweet girl. I don't take chances anymore. Sophie doesn't go anywhere without us, and we keep the doors locked tight. But every now and then, when I hear footsteps outside, or a soft tap on the window, my heart races. Because I know it's not over. Not yet. Thanks for watching. Good nightmares and stay scared.